Good morning. Wow, welcome to vBrownBag at VMworld 2016. I'm Steve Athanas.
My name is Matt Heldstab, and we are kicking off the vBrownBag series at VMworld.
Awesome. So we're here to talk today about using VDI in higher education. I'm from the University of Massachusetts on the Lowell campus, and we've been using VDI since about 2013.
And I work for Minnesota State, formerly the Minnesota State Colleges and Universities. We have 54 schools in the state of Minnesota, and we've been using VDI since about 2009.
So we thought we'd come here today and talk about some of our experiences, what we were able to build, why we built it, and what sort of issues we've run into and how we've overcome them. So first we'll talk about some use cases, right? So just very briefly, right? So a bunch of physical PCs in a computer lab, right, works as, you've got your hardware, your OS, and your application, really simple. And there's a bit more complexity when you add VDI to the equation. So why would you do that, right? Why not keep it simple? And the answer is, it's way better for a whole bunch of reasons, and that's what we're going to talk about today. So at UMass, the story was about making education more accessible. So we had a situation in 2013 where the campus was growing, classrooms are very expensive to build, and we wanted to be able to deliver anytime, anywhere access to data and applications to students. And so VDI was the way we achieved that. And it had a transformative effect right away in that labs have, if any of you have ever managed a lab, they have lab decay, right? So the computers start out new and fresh and good, and then after a semester, they start to kind of degrade, and people have installed adware or whatever on them. With non-persistent VDI, it's a fresh machine every time, and you can make students admins on it, so if they want to install something for one-off use, they can. So that changed how students were using the labs.
Yeah, I mean, the same thing that we deal with as well. Formerly, you guys have probably heard of deep freeze if you've ever managed a lab before. And the problem with deep freeze is you have to thaw it, and then you have to update the applications. And if there's a 0 day out there, well, then maybe your lab managers are on vacation or out. So you can actually take all of your labs in one fell swoop and update them to patch that 0 day exploit. And for users that have issues with recycling old PCs, you can actually extend the life of a workstation replacement as a VDI endpoint, or you can use a 0 or a thin client and not have to worry about that for a longer period of time.
Mm-hmm. And from the non-technical side, and it may be a bit of a touchy-feely kind of thing, is in an era of growing student costs, being able to remove the need for students to buy big, powerful laptops in order to run some of their software and buy just an iPad or an inexpensive, low-powered laptop and still run the same software is a good story that your provost would probably buy into. So again, we talked a little bit about this, but so our campus has a lot of commuter students, right? So not all of our students live on campus, and a lot of times they have to come back to campus in order to do work, right? So they'll come to class, then they'll go to work, and then they'll come back to campus to do their homework. By giving them remote access to VDI, they can do that from anywhere.
Sorry. I had to cough. I'm just not gonna. This is live. Anyway.
So yeah, one of the other things that we were able to do is give people the access to use it from anywhere on campus too. So now, instead of needing to go to the biology lab, you can go to the library, which is great because maybe your roommate who's an English major who's going to help you with your paper can't get into the biology lab. Now you can work together in the same place, so that's exciting.
Your remote access is an awesome thing for employees as well. So one of the things that we've done is made it so that people can work from home. We've got a work from home policy for a lot of the staff at our central office, as well as remote access for labs, because the way that we are dispersed throughout the state, we're in the policy, the central office, there's about 600 folks there. And what ends up happening is we go out and we say that we want to train users on one of our ERP systems or our online learning system, and everybody has to come to either St. Paul or St. Cloud, Minnesota, two of the central locations in the state. Now people can actually go to any of our schools and take a lab and reserve it and either install the View client on it, and then they can have a remote lab from anywhere in the state. And Minnesota is a fairly large state, not as big as California, but it's a pretty good sized state. So we're saving people a lot of money in travel, and it's just opening it up to a whole lot of possibilities. And Blast makes it even easier, where the people don't even have to work with the lab managers to install the View client on it. They just literally reserve the lab, open up Blast, and do the training, and walk out the door, and they don't even know.
Yeah. And so for us, we actually started using it not just for our staff, but in IT as well. So within my group, all of our admins have their jump boxes and admin consoles now in Horizon. so they can log in from anywhere and do any administrative task on the system. And it's very secure because you're using encryption to get to it, and that one VM can be very heavily firewalled because it's doing that one purpose. So I've actually reattached an Exchange database while I was in flight from Boston to San Francisco, which was awesome.
If you look at that slide here, that picture is actually semi-staged, but it is real. Those are actual view sessions in one of the state parks in Wisconsin. One of the coolest things is if I'm on call, I'll actually have my phone with me. I'll take the phone call, I'll put it on speaker, I'll open the Horizon client, hiking down a trail at a state park, and then help the person with my stylus, and then say thank you, everything's all fixed, and I'll keep walking. And my wife's a lot happier that way, instead of having to had to carry a laptop along and then sit by a tree. So, but it's really cool.
So, and then the other big reason is reducing your headaches, right? So for us, I don't know if anybody's ever used Ghost. Well, I assume everybody's used Ghost, right? To me, that's like the very worst thing you want to be doing is pulling the squid cart in, the switch with all the cables coming out of it to re-image your lab. So I'm very afraid of Ghost. The other thing is you can do iterative updates on your labs. So as you know, if you've ever managed a lab, it's always like you get it ready for the fall, and then it's locked in until winter, and then you redo it for the spring semester. We have now been able to do iterative updates on our labs, multiple times per week, because you do that development work without taking down any of the labs, and instead of re-imaging them, all you do is do a recompose, right, and then you're off. You can do it overnight, or you can do it as people log off, which is what we choose to do. So we can do these updates in the middle of the day, which is really exciting. We can add software faster than we ever have before.
And you can stage the updates ahead of time too, so if the people have some more time earlier on in the summer, and then right before school starts is when they have to wipe them all out, they can do all the work that they need to do way ahead of time, and then you set the recomposes to happen, and then everything's done.
Yep. And one of my favorite stories is our PC vendor, who I won't name, one time had a batch of bad power supplies, and they shipped us several hundred computers with bad power supplies. That was fun, because if you know anything about low-cost lab computers, they're not toolless chassis for the power supply. So turn a bunch of screws. You don't have to do that with VDI, right? So one of the things we're doing at UMass right now, which I'm really excited about, is we call it vLabs, which is the name for our VDI deployment workstation. And what we're doing is virtualizing applications that you've never been able to virtualize before. Things like SolidWorks, Moldflow, Mastercam, stuff that is both computationally intensive and graphically intensive. And we do that with the NVIDIA Grid technology. We're using M60 boards in there, and it's amazing. I could do it now, I don't have time, but I pulled up SolidWorks on my iPhone and started working with a two-cylinder motorcycle engine anywhere. I mean, I was doing it from the hotel, showing somebody yesterday. It's really, really impressive. And again, it has removed a lot of the burden from our students to buy these $3,000 workstation class laptops, and instead they can buy a $190 Chromebook when they can find it on sale on Amazon and do the exact same work, which is huge for a university that prides itself on reducing the cost of education.
And it's not just PC over IP with Blast Extreme getting better and better. It's only the VMware's relationship with NVIDIA and Grid is just improving.
Exactly. And it does, if you do add the GPU, the vGPU into your cluster, it does make Netflix work a lot better, which I assure you students care about very much. So just some limitations of physical desktop PCs, right?
Yep. So limitation. Okay, I think that might be a typo. These are physical. Oh no, I'm sorry.
Physical desktop limitations.
I'm back. All right. So physical desktop limitations are an opportunity for you to be able to come up with VDI use cases, and a lot of the use cases actually came to us that we didn't even think of. There's just a whole lot of them. As, of course, a primary user computing option, secure remote access is a no-brainer. Shared workstations is probably the best thing, because we've got several reception areas where they have maybe 3 or 4 people that have to be staffing it at all times. So instead of having a machine at the reception desk, and then they have a profile there, and then they go back to their desk and they have another profile, and they have to do things twice, and their desktop's not the same. We just have 0 clients, and then if you are a shared workstation user, everybody's got a Wise terminal, and they just go back and forth like that, and it saved them a whole lot of. All they have to do is tap the button, walk to the desk, log in, all their unsaved Word documents are right there, and they literally love it. ERP system software developers. So we have a homegrown ERP system. And we've got a whole slew of COBOL developers, Java developers, and what we used to see is all of the Macintoshes and Windows workstations they used to have would have their favorite set of tools. And instead of having a standardized tool set, it was a pain because developer A might say, oh yeah, here's how I do blah, blah, blah. And the developer B says, oh, I have a different version of Subversion. I'm not seeing the same thing you're seeing. And so if they all have the same exact virtual desktop to develop on, everything is identical. It's all, and one person can train everybody, and for sure it's going to be the same environment. So secure environment with standardized tool sets. Browser testing is another thing where some of our developer testers will make sure all the versions of the browsers work, although technically we still don't have to worry much about the older browsers versions because the campuses are starting to get everybody on IE11, but that's not necessarily done. It is out of support. In case you guys didn't know, they're not updating IE 8, 9, and 10 anymore.
IE 8, 9, and 10?
Newsflash.
I'm still worried about 6.
6. Sorry.
Oh, come on, so are you.
Dedicated training labs, mobile training labs, I hit on a little bit more about having the people literally move a training lab to a campus so that they can train all their users. Campus computing environment, secure online banking. We've got all of our finance people that have to do transfers into 7 figures from some of our loan systems. We don't allow them to do anything on something that can be keylogged. So they just simply have a Wise Terminal 0 client that can't get a keylogger on it, and then it's a lot more of a secure environment that we control on the VDI side. And then kiosk and digital signage is another good use case. And I'm really looking forward to the relationship that VMware and Raspberry Pi hopefully might be coming forth with, because that's a great use case for kiosk and digital signage.
So, all right, so it's fun to talk about the theory and why we did it, but how did we actually build this? How did we get it into the environment, right? So I just want to talk for a minute about the importance of end user experience. A lot of us that have moved into the end user computing area were, sysadmins, right? You're Windows guys or Linux guys or storage guys, or women, sorry. But instead of it being about administrative ease of use, it's all about the end user experience with end user computing, right? That's why it's called end user. If you don't deliver a product that makes their job either, certainly no worse, it's got to be the same, hopefully better, give them a better environment, something they enjoy more, the project will be at risk, right? So you need to get a lot of user feedback before you deploy this, right? Waiting for 2 months after deployment is way too late to get user feedback. You've got to do it ahead of time. And so how would you do that, right? And a lot of people say, oh, well, we do a proof of concept, and I would say that's not right, right? You want to do user acceptance testing. And so very briefly, the difference between a POC, strictly defined, and user acceptance testing is that in a proof of concept, you're trying to see if something works. You're not trying to see if people like using it. So the example that I've got here is it should have, this isn't the examples one, that's next. So that's the quick definition, right? But the goal is to get, in a user acceptance test, the goal is to get feedback from end users and have that modify or adjust your plans to make sure you're getting something that fits their needs very, very well, right? And it's a qualitative process. So here's an example, right? In a proof of concept, right? If we had a dishwasher, we want to see if the gasket will hold water in the dishwasher, and we test that, and the result is wet sneakers, floor, and a very angry wife, you have not passed the POC, right? On the other hand, if we want to do user acceptance testing, you want to know if a new dishwasher is going to work in your home, and you bring a bunch of dishes to Lowe's and look like a complete weirdo and load up the dishwasher and make sure that your wife is very happy with that, and it passes, the result is that you're now $1,000 poorer than you were before you brought the dishes in. I'm not saying I have experience with this, but I have experience with this. But let's stop talking about dishwashers and talk about computers for a second, right? So in the network side, right, our proof of concept would be, will PC over IP work over our firewalls? And you can test that by seeing whether a PC over IP tunnel will be established over your firewalls and if it works. And that's great. You can check that box. But do your users like it, right? So for USB, you could see whether USB works, but what you want to know is whether it's an acceptable experience for them, whether they like using it. And so what we did is we put it in front of users. So how do you run a great user acceptance test? In our case, we didn't tell anybody we were doing it, right? We defined what we were looking to do from a business standpoint. We learned all we could about our use cases, and we decided what we weren't going to tackle in those use cases. And don't tell anybody you're testing. What we did is we went into a computer lab, removed one computer, and stuck in one VDI terminal. We didn't tell anybody. We waited to get feedback. We actually stuck people in the back of the room dressed sort of like students, to sit and watch what was happening and see whether they were able to do their work. It turned out very quickly people were preferring that over the physical PCs, which gave us a good indicator that we were on the right path, right?
So it's really important to note too that there are some really good software products out there that will do user experience for you, and they will actually grade your performance or your user experience. That does not replace user acceptance testing either, even though that's what the tool is for. You can use it as a tool to assist you in coming up with a final diagnosis, or if the user experience is not good for your UAT, then you can use that tool to help diagnose what the problem is.
Yep.
All right, so piloting your VDI isn't all you need to pilot. Supporting VDI is also a really important nut to crack. So there are various levels of support. For example, first level support, choose them from your desktop engineer talent pool. What currents do they currently have, and how does that overlap with what your needs are? Endpoint management is still a required skill and a great tier 1 task. So if you've got, say, HP zeros and you need to do firmware updates, teach those tier 1 people how to do that. It will assist them in buying into your solution, because the very first thing that they think when their boss says, oh, by the way, some of these desktops are going away, they're doing VDI instead, is they're going to feel threatened. So you need to get them to buy in so that they are a part of the solution, and then you can actually groom them for promoting them to second or third level support. Second level support meaning desktop lifecycle management, patching, recomposing. Full clone versus link clone is something also that you can take advantage of. We've got all of our physical desktops use SCCM. So what we do is for some of our needier users, we give them full clone desktops and we have SCCM manage them. And we give our desktop support group that responsibility. That means that they're actually managing some virtual desktops. It's not the ideal setup because it's not link clone or instant clone. But at least they're gaining buy-in to the solution, and again, you can groom them for future support roles. Maintaining the parent image change log is really, really key, making sure that absolutely every single thing that they do is logged. We have an Excel spreadsheet, and we just go straight down every single time that we do anything, it's logged. And if that log is missed, then you can't go back and rebuild the parent if you ever need to, because parents get bloated. It just happens. So you want to be able to go back to the very beginning and reproduce what you've done so that you can build your parent over again. Interface.
Just generally, I find that to be just generally a good practice to do on some set interval. We try to do that annually, take it all the way down to bare VM and rebuild it, because too much gets changed in that parent image and it starts to get wonky, and then you're like, why is this app not running like it used to, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And something that's also overlooked is there needs to be a pool owner. So for instance, our developer pool, we can't just have developer Q or developer B come to us and say, I need X tool. I want that to be installed. Their boss needs to be the pool owner, and that person should approve the update, and nothing other than security and critical Windows updates and maybe some application updates should be inserted into the parent image without the approval of the parent or the pool owner. And that's something that can really help you with tool sprawl. And then third level support is typically your VMware administrator, people that manage the hypervisor and the actual application for Horizon, load balancing, things like that. But communication is key across all levels. Make sure that if tier 3 is doing something, that tier 2 understands it, or else it could cause a bunch of problems.
So, and all of this stuff is true no matter what happens, but you do need an endpoint, right? So there are lots of options to choose from. I know some universities like to reuse the desktops they already have, right? We chose to go with all brand new Zero clients, right? And there's a lot of different reasons to choose different things. We went with the Zero clients because we wanted something that used very little power. Part of the way we sold this through the university system was that we were doing green computing. We were reducing our carbon footprint by doing this. So we wanted things that use 8 to 10 watts instead of 400. So, and the Zero clients are nice because there's no software to manage on them whatsoever. But you want to make sure whatever you're choosing, you've got something with strong central management, so you don't have to run out and see these. Otherwise, you've saved yourself nothing in building VDI. Right? You want to make sure they have as little patching as possible for basically the same reason, and you want to pay attention to your delivery protocols. Are you going to use PC over IP? Are you going to use Blast or Blast Extreme? Are you going to be using RDP if you decide that you want to go with that?
But yeah, there are a whole lot of options for zero clients and thin clients out there. But just because it's a cheap option does not mean it should be your option. So our first initial foray into VDI in 2009 was using SunRays. Now, there's not a whole lot of people here probably that know what SunRays are or have managed them, but they require a whole lot of additional administrative headaches. It's not just your typical server, connection server, and the endpoint. You actually have a Solaris farm of VMs that are in between your thin client and your connection server that it has to interface through. And it worked great. We owned them, but that doesn't necessarily mean it was free, because Oracle ended up buying Sun. When Oracle bought Sun, they refused to put PC over IP into the equation. So we just pretty much stood on Horizon or on View 4 without PC over IP, using RDP, while everybody else that was using more modern endpoints was enjoying PC over IP. So I don't know if that didn't build right, did it? Try.
Nope. Hold on, is it? Nope.
There's more building in there.
Sorry.
That's okay. Oh, here we go. It was a
out of order.
Out of order slide, no problem. So this was a little bit of our flowchart on our initial VDI environment. It's very, very complicated for about 100 virtual desktops. So this is not what you want, but that was required because we ended up going with SunRays. So then eventually Oracle decided to stop developing SunRays altogether, and then it was pretty much, so we were done. We had to go with something else and pick a PC over IP, a zero client instead. So yeah, Oracle made our life not ideal for a while. Oh.
Did you got email?
I guess I forgot to ask Oracle for permission.
Oops.
Oh boy, I'll get a phone call.
So, all right, so you've got to support this, and I think we're running a little short on time, so we'll try to get through this quickly, right? So, once you have this up, how do you support it well, right? And I mean, it takes your entire team, which we've sort of touched on, right?
Right. Yeah, so you have to have somebody that really understands the hypervisor, kind of the type of people that were here that manage VMware and ESX. As with server virtualization, a solid grasp of vSphere is required. Your server virtualization folks can handle this. On the network side, you have to have somebody that understands firewall, LAN, storage, networking. Configuring QoS for PC over IP is a really good thing to do, just so that if you don't have to worry about your backups throttling your network and causing problems like we've dealt with in the past times. Maintaining the port channels for all VLANs is a really big deal, because I am not a Cisco guy, but if I have to add another VLAN to a port channel, if it's done wrong, well, now everything's offline, and they blame this virtual desktop environment.
Everything's VDI's fault.
Everything's VDI's fault, because if you have a zero client, all they know is that they just got a login screen back again.
Right.
Oh, VDI crashed.
Yeah, and I think it's important to note that, and I don't think we have this in the slide deck, right? But if you have an issue somewhere in your stack, VDI will expose that. If you have a problem in AD, you're going to notice it more with VDI. If you've got a problem with your network, you're going to notice it with VDI. If your wireless isn't up to snuff, you're going to notice it, right? So you've got to make sure that if your application licensing isn't right, you're going to notice it. So I always think of VDI as sitting at the very top of the stack and doing a very good job of exposing all of the issues in your environment. So be prepared for that and be ready to act quickly.
If you've got group policies that need to be applied on the workstation before it comes up and it doesn't get applied because it's a problem with Active Directory, then they get vanilla desktops and they're screaming at this VDI environment. It has nothing to do with VDI, it's Active Directory.
And even if your GPOs are great, your fancy printer assignment GPO won't work anymore.
Yeah, absolutely. So there were a couple of other things I'll just go through really quick. So load balancer, SAN, fabric zoning, if you have a dedicated storage admin. But load balancer is a big thing for highly available VDI. Don't use DNS round robin for VDI. I have had a lot of people that have done DNS round robin, because in that way, if you patch a connection server, well, it'll fail once and then they try again and it goes to the right one. But if you do the math, 1 out of every 4 people, it will fail twice in a row. 1 out of every 8 people, it's going to fail 3 times in a row. 3 times they're going to say it's broke and not even try again. So if you've got 200 users, 1 out of every 8 fails 3 times in a row. Just don't do it. Use load balancers if you want to be highly available. And
have redundant load balancers.
Yes.
Not saying how I learned that, but have redundant load balancers.
And don't use Microsoft load balancing.
Oh. Is that audible?
I love Microsoft. compute and storage management, rack mount, converged infrastructure, or hyperconverged, either way, have somebody that understands the environment, and a deep understanding of how VDI impacts a storage system as well. And so we used to use a non-flash based storage solution when we first started, and we paid the price. And things are a lot better now that a lot of these other hybrid and all-flash solutions are gaining maturity.
So we talked a little bit about this. We're running really short on time, so we'll just leave this slide up for a second.
Okay. Yeah, you guys can read it.
So, all right, so legacy desktop support is not the same as desktop virtualization. Obviously, you've got to know some different things in there. We'll leave this slide up. You can pause the video and go through this, right? But make sure you're thinking whether you're using full clones or linked clones or instant clones.
Right. So you can see how this could get very complicated. I think that we might want to just end it here. This is probably a good spot to end.
Okay.
But VDI is absolutely something that's super, super great as a use case for users. I mean,
it has the ability to transform your organization's workflow, and I mean that at a very fundamental level. We have people on campus that teach their course differently now as a result of having this technology available than they used to. It has improved student success and retention in certain academic disciplines that are leveraging the technology. So that's the sort of transformative technology that we always want to be doing, and too often spend our time, focused on stuff that nobody ever notices. So this has that potential.
Right. So, I mean, let's go through these really quick. Automation, if you're getting larger, using Power CLI can really help automate some of your tasks. And there are some really good blog locations here for automating not just VDI, but vSphere in general. And
it's really quick. So here's some issues that we've run into, right? So one is make sure your clocks are accurate. Use an NTP server, sync everything up. I can't stress that enough. Especially if you're running Windows 7, there's a problem with retrograde clock skew. If time rolls back, DHCP crashes. That's really bad. If you lose your IP address in VDI, you lose your whole system, right? And make sure that you really vet your USB use cases out. If you're using a PC over IP terminal, you're never going to get native USB performance, so make sure that's acceptable, again, in your use case. It's all about knowing your use case really well and making sure that the technology you're applying meets the end user needs.
And don't run your endpoint through a 100 meg switch Cisco phone.
Yeah.
We've learned that the hard way.
Yeah. And so we won't go into these issues, but some problems you have are based on people. If you ever have questions, look either of us up and we'll be happy to talk about them. But at the very end, if people complain about the keyboards, tell them to use their own device. So,
okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's about it. So I think we're out of time. This is a longer presentation. We tried to rush through it quick, and I think that we were a little off on our time, but that's fine. Appreciate it.
Thank you, everybody.